to episode 14 of People Are the Answer. I truly believe that people are the only answer to the world's many problems. I'm Jeffrey M. Zucker, a serial entrepreneur, here to learn how innovators are creating outsized, transformational social impact. Today's episode features my friend Troy Dayton. Troy is a longtime drug policy and criminal justice reform advocate. He is a founding member of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, served as the chair of the board at the Marijuana Policy Project, and he founded the largest investor network in the cannabis industry in 2010, the ArcView Group. Troy taught me that business is truly the most powerful vehicle for change. Having moved on from getting people out of physical prisons, he's now focused on helping them get out of mental prisons, aiming to help people experience more joy, connection, and vitality. Troy and I discussed drug policy reform, what juicy habits can bring to your life, and much more. Here is Troy Dayton on People Are the Answer. I know you're a founding member of Students for Sensible Drug Policy and would love to hear a little more about how that got going and how you feel about how things have evolved since then for the organization.
Yeah, I mean, SSDP is just one of my, I just feel so amazed at what they've become and the impact that they've made. And, I remember sitting in this basement apartment that me and Mark Brando used to live in and having lots of conversations with people about what a big student movement for drug policy would look like, and imagining, thousands and thousands of people working on this. Because when we were working on it, this is 1996, 97, 98. And, this was a very fringe issue, very fringe. In fact, we weren't even taken seriously by most of the other activists on campus, right? It was just seen as like, oh, these people just want to get high. They're just fighting for their own self-interest. They're not interested in the larger, but that was not true. We were totally interested in the larger thing, but there's just so much stigma associated with it during that time. And, there was normal, and, normal just didn't really appreciate the college thing very much. And we were just sort of like we just also thought that was represented an older kind of activism, and we wanted something a little bit more, broad. And so, then Mark Souder, who was a representative at the time, passed a law, an amendment to the Higher Education Act, which banned college students from getting financial aid if they had a drug conviction. Well, when that happened, it was, wow, we had this huge rallying cry. And that is what inspired us to actually start Students for Sensible Drug Policy, build something different, and really start using that to build a movement. So, at the time, we hated Mark Souder, but now looking back, I really appreciate Mark Souder for passing such an awful bill, because it galvanized the student movement that went on to legalize cannabis and play such a really key role in a lot of the victories that are happening all around the world for drug policy. So yeah, it was it's really great to be part of starting that.
Yeah, it's really incredible to see how the organization's impact has grown over the years and how it started in such a small way and was invigorated by you and the other founders.
Yeah, it's really great.
So to inform the listeners, you and I were once on the board of Marijuana Policy Project together, and I know you worked with them very early. MPP founded in 95. Would love to hear about your history with that organization and, how that evolved, which it did quite a bit over time.
Yeah, well, I was MPP's first volunteer, one of the first volunteers. I remember when they sent out their very first mailing to potential donors, and I, was sitting in Rob Campia's bedroom in a group house, with a mattress on the floor, and we were sitting there licking envelopes and making, for this first mailing for MPP. And now, there, 20, 30 people work there. Is like, and they've made such a huge impact. So yeah, being there right at that moment, was powerful. And I think that we, yeah, I just was so into what they were about and into the different way that they were orienting to activism. And so I got involved. And then my first job was as the volunteer coordinator. My first job in drug policy was as a volunteer coordinator for the Initiative 59 campaign in 1998, which was right after California had passed Prop 215. This was the next year. DC was running something similar, and it passed with 69% of the vote, which was outrageous. And so that was my first thing. And then I just stayed involved with the organization. And then I went on to, they had a grants program at the time, and I went on to work with Chuck Thomas at Unitarian Universalists for Drug Policy Reform and the Interfaith Drug Policy Initiative, where I worked with religious leaders for 3 years. So even though I wasn't at MPP, I was an MPP grantee. And so stayed involved there. And then at some point, I moved out to California, and I became a fundraiser for the Marijuana Policy Project and also MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, back when they were only 8 people. They're now like 120 people,
Wow.
right? So yeah. And so I was a fundraiser. And so I got to connect with a lot of the high net worth people and, continue to hone how to inspire people to give to causes and to part with money for things that they care about.
Yeah, well, I imagine that came into play in your future endeavors. But before we dig in too far into those, I know you had some sales experience before some of the drug policy reform work, and I'm curious how that informed your work.
Yeah, so when I was in college, I sold books door to door for 3 summers. And it was like we worked 80 hours, so culty. I mean, and we worked 80 hours a week. We like lived on like the floor, and like it was like it was so intense, but also so thrilling to be able to make a living with just a backpack. That's it. Like a backpack of books and an order form. And then you just had to go and make your way and start developing relationships by knocking on doors. It's the most intense kind of sales you can have. It totally creates real adversity in a way that can be, it's so hard. It's just so hard to get rejected all day long and to have we didn't get any hourly rate or anything. Like, we didn't sell anything, you didn't make anything. And I really got to understand people, and also got to get face to face with my own sort of demons around motivation and around, integrity and staying on schedule and these sorts of things. But I also got my first taste of like that part in me that like is like, hell no, I'm not working 80 hours a week. Like, there's this whole thing of like, growing up in capitalism, there's some great things about it. And then there's some other things that are not so great. This idea that you should always be working, that you should always do what's most efficient, and all of these things. So I got to get face to face for the first time with that thing inside of me in a really, really, really deep way. And I learned a lot from that, and learned how to talk to a wide range of people, started to really understand how people make decisions. And it was very, and I met some of the people that I would later go on to build businesses with and do different things with, and who've been a real inspiration to me for my whole life.
It sounds like those were foundational skill sets that you were building and that you still utilize today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. When people who did that job, when we see each other, we're like, we know.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, there's something, and there's all this lingo associated with it too. So it's like, it's interesting.
Well, after, you got into the drug policy reform movement, and eventually that led you to found the ArcView Group. could be argued, in my opinion, that you're the founder of the modern cannabis industry and that ArcView was the spark for that. Maybe just fill the listeners in a bit on what ArcView is and how it started.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I find myself a little bit like, I don't know about whether there's a lot of people who would would reject the idea that we started the modern move. I'd say here's what I would say. I'd say that um, we were the first investment group and the first market research group. Like we played a really pivotal role in creating the infrastructure and the kinds of things that existed in other industries in the cannabis industry, which began to give it a level of credibility. Because when people looked at a new industry, right, they're like, okay, well, great. Well, where's the market reports, and where do the investors get deal flow, right? Like those are the first two things that people would ask if they would enter a new space. Well, in 2009 and 2010, 2011, none of those things existed. And so we kind of stepped in and began offering those kinds of things. And it really, the market report took off, and then also the investor network really took off. But what started it was a conversation that I had with Steve D'Angelo, where I was realizing that I was only going to be able to make so much of a difference by walking around and begging rich people for money to fund drug policy reform. Like there was just going to be a limit to that. And what I had learned, I had spent some time in the renewable energy industry, and what I realized from that was that there's only so much you can do by writing letters to members of Congress to try and change laws. Ultimately, if you want something done in this world, you got to figure out how to make it profitable. And that's what they did with renewables. They figured out how to make renewables profitable, and that led to a much faster growth than we would ever get from just writing letters to Congress. And it's like, for better or worse, we live in a world that is totally driven, not totally, but largely driven by profit. So if you want some positive outcome to happen in the world, how can you harness this incredible force of profit motive to accomplish it? Because then if you can angle things right, if you can get interests aligned enough, it can really take off. And so the idea behind ArcView was, if we can utilize business as the most powerful force for change, and predicted that it was ultimately, legalization was going to happen because enough people who were in the business had enough in it to really make the donations and make the connections and give it the kind of credibility it needed in order to get more freedom to exist. And I think that in many ways that was naive. I think it's true that it is the most powerful force in the universe, and also because it's so powerful, it is very hard to steer.
Yeah, it's very
And
true.
I think we learned that, right? I think in the early days, I think we made a big difference. I saw ArcView as like a place where people who were previously kind of only sort of corporate profit focused would kind of get, catch the wave of philanthropy and meaning, deeper meaning in work, and the power of community,
Yeah.
and camaraderie and creating kind of a new kind of industry, right? And then I also saw it as a place where people that came from more the activist world, or sort of the world of keeping things small or whatever, could learn from the best ideas and the best ideals of the business world. And a lot of that happened, but I think ultimately, uh, I think now we look at the part of the reason I'm not in the cannabis industry anymore is I look at it and I go, you know what? It's just another industry now.
Right.
And it has made a huge difference in freeing people and getting people out of jail and all of these things. And yet here we are, we've got public companies, we've got people making millions and millions and millions of dollars a year, billions in some cases. And yet there's still a lot of the country where people are getting arrested.
Yeah.
Like I never would have guessed if you'd have asked me in 2010 when we started this, if 12 years from now we would have a 30-40 billion dollar industry, legal industry, and there'd still be people being arrested, put in jail. I would tell you no way, because the profit motive would cause people to uh, to change that, and it's had some success, but it it hasn't seemed to cause it. And if you look at what percentage of the laws that are changed today that are funded by the industry, it's small.
Yeah.
And then when the industry does fund them, they're they're like monopolistic, or they're like they just try and keep it for a small group, and so you have to deal with that. And it's just like, wow, it's really hard
Yeah.
to get that to work.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on all of that, and I think it's certainly the case. I mean, ArcView was the door to advocacy for me. I'm an example of what you were trying to do. I think, I came into the cannabis industry in 2015, seeing it as, this is something I just started learning about, having grown up in the South where it was demonized. And I saw this isn't the demon that people think it is. And I wanted to learn about opportunities as I saw growth happening. And coming into ArcView not only showed me those opportunities, but it introduced me to advocacy in the organizations and the incredible atrocities of the drug war, and how that was the most important aspect of this industry. And, you taught me at ArcView that business is the most powerful vehicle for change, and it's shown in many ways in my life. So thank you for that. And, if nothing else, you bred an advocate in me, and, we ended up working together in advocacy. And certainly I've seen firsthand those businesses that try to, create legislation that's monopolistic and things like that. And one thing I always appreciated when you were on the board and the chair at MPP was that we were, at your guidance, we were always about just changing the laws and getting people out of jail. And we generally didn't bend to the will of the industry. I mean, we tried to bring them along as partners, but and I'd say that still remains at MPP. I mean, we work with the industry as best we can, but it's still the top priority is ending the war on drugs and the war on cannabis.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm touched that that you have been inspired to remain involved and to make that kind of change, and that MPP is staying true to that. Um, it's when you can get interests to align, business is the best possible way to do it. But when interests don't align, it's like business is like water, man. It just flows to wherever, whatever's going to hold it. And so if you can build the kind of thing that the water wants to flow into, you win.
Yeah.
And when those interests diverge, which in some cases they are now, it becomes quite difficult.
Yeah. It can certainly be frustrating. As much as I am involved in the business and as much as that was my driver for my first engagement, I'm definitely advocacy first these days. And I've run into some of those people and I've had arguments about it. And I wish there was a way to make some of these business people a little more altruistic, because I believe that profit is a very powerful vehicle. You can create purpose within profit, and maybe it cuts your profit more, but the mutual benefit for everyone is there. And I'm still trying to push people in that direction. And a big part of this podcast is interviewing people that are doing that. So you've always been one of the examples.
Yeah, thanks for doing that, and for, carrying that flag.
Absolutely. So you mentioned you're not really involved in the cannabis industry anymore. It sounds like the industry itself kind of led you to leave. Do you have any involvement at this point, or are you just sort of watching it as it evolves?
Yeah, I mean, well, so what I'll say is that when I started, when Steve and I started ArcView, I had just started a counseling practice, and I had really loved it. I had a like in 2011, early 2000, by mid 2012, I had almost a full boat of clients, and I was just loving it. I mean, when I was in these one-on-one things helping people with their growth, I mean, you could hear a pin drop in these sessions. Like I just felt so on purpose. I loved seeing people transform before my eyes and loved being part of that. And I was thinking I was going to leave ArcView to to do that, but I wasn't, quite ready to do that. And ArcView was small. I mean, there was only, two people basically, one and a half. I mean, it was like it wasn't going that well, but it was still, we had a couple little things going. And then what happened is in November of 2012, we legalized cannabis in Washington and in Colorado. And a few months later, uh, ArcView's on the cover of Fortune magazine. And so I wound up dropping all my clients because my this business that I had started that I thought maybe I was going to leave because I had found a new calling, um, wound up taking off, and I got thrown right into back into the center of things, and on the news, and become the Pied Piper for this industry, right? And I enjoyed it. I feel grateful for all the things that I was able to be part of, and the community we were able to build, and everything. And but I also knew in the back of my mind that there was this other calling, and when the time was right, I was gonna do that. And so that eventually came about, 2 years ago, when we were able to do a financing, where I would step aside and others would move in, um, and and so that was sort of, kind of why I did that and why I left. And now, and I slowly got off all my boards. I slowly kind of like backed away from everything. And there are, I sometimes think, I've said to people, look, if after 25 years in cannabis, like if I never have to think about cannabis again, it would be great. Um, but I also, a lot of that was reactionary, right? Like just like, being a little burnt out from all of that. Now it's been about 2 years. And as I'm working with clients, I'm finding I am winding up working with clients in the cannabis sector. And I'm finding that I love you guys. I love my people. But I don't think my role is to be in business. It's like every person that is in the cannabis industry is also a human being that is, struggling in various ways with their meaning and their purpose and their sense of joy, and how they, all the things that come in their relationships and their connection, all those things, and being able to help people through that, while also bringing my business mind and bringing this sense of really understanding some of the challenges that they face, has been wonderful. And I'm just recently officially back in the industry to some degree, which is that Jess Dugan,
Mhm.
who was really the first employee in the Fortune magazine, post world, um, at ArcView, a couple years ago, she peeled off and started this thing called Reflections, where she was bringing people together for these wellness retreats, for people in the cannabis industry. And it was really just an opportunity to reflect, to go to workshops led by people in the cannabis industry who have other skills besides just their cannabis stuff, and to really take time and to use it as a personal growth and community building in a smaller kind of environment. And I've always been a teacher at that. I've led the group in human connection based kinds of exercises and really been involved on the personal growth side. And so uh, she wanted to really expand the brand and to do more with it. And so her and I have partnered up to do the next Reflections retreat. And obviously, it's been on a 2-year hiatus because of COVID, but August 11th through 14th, we're going to be bringing together 75 people in the cannabis and psychedelic industries for a week of yoga, breath work, workshops on a wide range of things, and really getting a chance to connect in ways that really, really build real connections that change the world,
Yeah.
not exchanging a business card at an exhibit expo.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to look at the contrast between those two things. I'm a huge fan of Jess, and while I haven't been fortunate enough to attend one of the events, I've heard amazing things from friends that have been there, and I'm really excited to know that you're helping kind of move that in the next direction.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's great. And then the other thing that I'm really involved in right now is um, specifically working with people who are seriously considering leaving their roles as founders or on executive teams of companies, right? So people who are kind of in the boat that I was in that they know that they're feeling a different kind of calling. Maybe their company has grown and they are no longer feel like as excited about it as they were when it was fresh and new, and they think they've got another song in them, and and it really helping people with the identity work around that, right? So actually thinking through, like, who am I, how much do I put into my role as like CEO or whatever, founder of something, and then what else is possible, and like working through that while also really thinking about the practical aspects of how do you orchestrate the kind of deal that would allow that to happen, and how do you do right by the people who um, your investors or your employees or your other business partners and stuff like that. So actually it's like a cross between coaching and consulting, because I'm actually not just working on the emotional side but also on the practical side of how to navigate these kinds of things. So that's been, because I know what it was like to feel
Yeah.
trapped in that way.
Yeah, I mean, what an important role. I know plenty of people that have, experienced burnout in their positions or just feel like a company has outgrown them, or like you're saying, have another calling. And it can be so difficult. Those people you were mentioning, most of these people don't want to hurt investors. They don't want to hurt their partners, but they want to enjoy their lives and make the most of it. And the idea of having you both from an emotional side and a practical side is helping with that sounds like a really tremendous asset for your clients.
Yeah, it's just fun. It just wakes me up. I just love it. I love helping people through those things. It turns out that I love those conundrums a whole lot more when it's not me going through
Yeah,
them.
yeah, I can imagine. Yep. Just the exercise of it is entertaining, and not having to be as directly connected to the potential consequences.
Right, exactly.
So you're calling your coaching "Be Well, Be Free," right? And I mean, I always saw that as your sign off on emails for many years, and I'm curious, was that around in the pre-ArcView days? Is that something you adopted since then?
Yeah, it's been around probably since, God, it must have been, yeah, it's early 2000s. I've I I got yeah, I think it was uh where did it come from? So I think where it came from is that I got a handwritten note from Wayne Dyer. I had reached out to him as like somebody that I admired, and you know, and he sent me a handwritten letter back, and in the bottom he said, "In love and light, Wayne Dyer." And he's just so my like was somebody that I just was such a uh, an icon to me, that, and I remember thinking, I need one of those. What would mine be, right? And And I just said, well, what am I about? And I was like, being well and being free. And it just did it. And then I think I did it for a little while. And then I got it when Gmail came out. I got be well, be free at gmail.com. And that really solidified it, because then it was just like a constant reminder and just became the thing that I put under things. And then an imitation is often the highest form of flattery. When Steve D'Angelo was redoing Harborside, you'll notice on the way into Harborside, I don't know if it's still there, but there's a sign that says "Be well, be free," and something that he's really took on as well. And it's just so cool to see that that's taken off in that way. But I really love the sentiment behind it, and so it was just obvious that that would be the name of my practice.
Yeah. It certainly speaks to your personality and what you're trying to do for people. I really appreciate it. And I'd love to hear more about what you're doing. You talked about coaching. I know you've been doing some online courses and group experiences. I'd be curious to learn more about those.
Yeah, so I led this course twice called Make That Change, which is a course in habit change, but it's a little bit of a different take on habit change. Instead of just getting people to commit to things and then putting them in accountability groups, um, it's using habit change as a way to inquire about one's life, right? And to inquire about our resistances, and to inquire about, well, why did we choose that habit to want to change, right? What beliefs are underneath why we think that one is the thing, and there's so much to learn when we put ourselves in difficult things that we can measure ourselves against, because it opens up a whole big question about, can we love ourselves when we don't follow through? What good is shame? We spend a lot of time on how shame is sort of the junk food of motivation, right? And it can be used effectively, but it's like really the worst form of motivation.
Yeah.
And so that's just such an opportunity. So those are some of the things we do in the Make That Change course. I haven't led it. I didn't lead it this year, but I will probably lead it in the future. And I focus a lot on this idea of tiny habits. There's this researcher, BJ Fogg, who wrote a book called Tiny Habits. And it's basically this idea that to start with something so small that it's almost imperceptible. He talks about how he wanted to floss his teeth, and so he made an agreement that he would floss one tooth, right? Now, of course, if you floss one tooth, you're probably going to wind up flossing the others. But there's this way of, like, if you want to meditate, don't commit to meditating a half hour a day. Commit to meditating for 2 minutes a day. And then you can slowly increase from there. And there's a whole bunch of research around it and everything. And I found it to be a really valuable method.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How you can make small changes that really end up impacting your life. You mentioned the phrase to me before this, juicy habits. How does that phrase come into play?
Yeah. So many of us think about habits as like, what habits do you want to change? And most people are like, I want to exercise, I want to eat better, I want to get up at 6 a.m., I want to, like, whatever it is, right? I want to, keep my house clean, whatever. It's all these things that maybe sometimes are fun, but there's not something that we really want to do all the time. And I really think that there's something to be said for thinking about habits that are fun that we don't do. So for me, one of those is singing in the shower. One of the things that got me through the quarantine was I made a commitment that I would push play on my liked songs on Spotify when I got in the shower. And invariably, I would want to sing once I was in there. And but yet, without making that commitment, I would go weeks sometimes without singing. I would go weeks without playing music in the thing. It was like making a commitment to something that I absolutely love. I love it. And so we often deny ourselves things that we love, um, because maybe on some level we don't feel like we deserve it, or because we just have other things on our mind that we're trying to get done. And so, also I think we've grown up in a culture that doesn't value recreation
Mm.
as seriously. Like people say, oh, I'm doing that, but just for fun. Just for fun? Like, what are we here for?
Yeah.
Like, what? Why do we do all the things we don't want? So we can have fun,
Yeah.
right? So taking your fun seriously, taking your joy seriously. And so there's these little juicy habits that I think all of us can really identify what's a juicy habit, and start there.
Yeah.
Start committing to something that you love to do.
Yeah. No, I think that is really powerful. I mean, myself, like everyone, certainly has things that, I enjoy in life that I don't commit the time to. And so the time just slips away. And,
Yeah.
making sure to make the
What's
time.
something for you?
I like doing art, and I don't do it enough, whether that's painting or drawing. And, during
Hmm.
the pandemic, I did make a little more time for it. It's kind of slipped up as things have gotten rolling again. And it certainly puts me in a good mood and a happy place. And it's something that I should try to commit the time to. And, maybe there's an easy step to that.
What's the smallest step you could possibly imagine to putting yourself in position to more likely do that?
Maybe blocking some specific time for it, even if just a few
Hmm.
minutes, just to say, during these
Hmm.
few minutes, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Do you have like is there like it's painting and stuff? Do you have like an easel or
I
anything?
do. I have an easel, I have paints, and then I also draw on my iPad.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, what I would might suggest is setting up your easel and having your paints super ready and your paintbrushes totally ready, so that it's like it's just in the path of where you go during the day, and that way there's sometimes it's the littlest things. Like some people don't exercise simply because like the shoes aren't handy, they're not next to the bed, or they feel like they need to be in different clothes. It's like, okay, sleep in your workout clothes,
You're right.
like who cares, right? Just a certain little things. But anyway, good luck with that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I love the idea of like having these little fixes that can kind of crush excuses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also, it's real, the excuses are interesting. Let's not poo-poo excuses.
Yeah.
Those excuses are there for a reason, and that's what's really interesting. Is I think our resistance is fascinating and not something to be shamed. It's pointing to something, and it's always interesting to like really start exploring what your resistance is pointing to. And oftentimes it's pointing to um, uh, our what I'll say is our upper limit of havingness. This is a term from Carolyn Elliott, who I've really come to appreciate, and it's this idea that like there's a little thermostat inside of us that is keeping us playing small, that's keeping us from having all that we want. Um, and so we actually have to work on getting our subconscious aligned with our conscious mind in order so that they're playing on the same team. Because if your consciousness wants success or wants to have the most joy or all of these things, but your subconscious is really kind of like likes to keep things tight, right? And likes to keep you, kind of always striving and never arriving. Like how can we talk to that subconscious and get everybody on the same page? and increase your total havingness, like your ability to hold more joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are some of the ideas.
It's awesome. I think a lot of people don't have those kind of thoughts enough, aren't thinking about their own happiness and joy. And it's really important that everyone takes the time to do that.
Yeah.
So you another phrase that you'd mentioned previously to me was soul to soul instead of roll to roll. That sounded interesting. I was curious to learn more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, part of the game of being human, particularly the game of being human in our current world, is that we're very focused on each other's roles, right? We're very focused on, how we're different from another person based on the role that we're playing. And certainly we need roles because we all need things that we need to do, right? Um, and sometimes it's fun to play into those roles. And at the same time, it's those roles and our belief in them hide the real truth of the matter. And the real truth of the matter is that there's a spark in every human being. Like it's like there's this illusion of separateness in the world, right? And culture does such a good job of convincing us that we're separate from each other. But I like to see us as like branches all on the same tree. And it looks like, from one vantage point that those are totally different, but we're all attached to the same tree. And the more that we can, psychedelics are great for this, right? They're great for us shifting our consciousness into connecting to the interconnectedness of us to each other's human. But like one of the little practices I like to do is to just walk down the street and every time you pass somebody, to just imagine that their experience of being human is as rich and varied. They've had joys and sorrows. They've had challenges. Like we're all made up of the same stuff, and that makes us closer.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the things that this is one of the principles that I was using a lot at ArcView that I think partly made ArcView have a different feel of connection, that people felt so connected to each other in those environments, because I was doing the kinds of things that helped people get beyond their roles and into their souls as human beings sharing. And there's so much more connection available, not just to each other, but to ourselves and to our connection to everything, the more we can get tapped in that. And that's one of the reasons I lead a lot of this group work, to get people connected, is that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get people to melt their roles into their souls, in a way that creates, a feeling, a felt sense of connection. It's one thing to intellectualize that. Yeah, I can look over there and see that you probably have a life that is an inner life that is as rich as mine, but it's hard for me to intellectualize my way there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we live in such a divisive society these days, and this type of mindset is so important to get us out of that, realizing that we're all people that, want to be happy, that we've all experienced these various things. And I tend to preach mutual benefit and as many decisions as possible because we all just want to be happy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And it changes too. The Ram Dass has a great story that he tells where his dad was a lawyer, and he went to go see his dad, and he said that why did you charge I know it was. He was giving Ram Dass a hard time for giving away his book for such a cheap price. And he said, why don't you charge, a lot more, and you could make all this more money? And he said, well, let me ask you this. You're a lawyer, right? How much did you charge so-and-so for your services? And he said, as much as I could. And, why? Because, well, I worked hard and everything else. And then he said, well, when Uncle Henry worked with you, did you charge him? No, of course I didn't charge him. He's my brother. Why would I charge my brother and everything else? And he says, well, that's the difference between you and me, is that to me, everyone is Uncle Henry, right? And so so this idea of like, how can we make everyone our family? How can we how can we expand our circle of empathy? And, look, I mean, I'm not saying I'm great at that. Like, I struggle with it as much as anybody, but it's about continuing to take the garbage out, so
Right.
to speak, and remind us that we're more than just cogs in this sort of machine of roles.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful, and thank you for sharing. Just the last thing I wanted to ask about in
Yeah.
your teaching is 4 phrases for a centered life.
Yeah. So I had just come back from Burning Man. I was at with some friends. I was at a hot springs, and I was sitting in the hot springs, and sometimes you just get like some things, like ideas or concepts, or like just a voice comes, and it just like, and it feels like it's almost not even yours, but it is, maybe, I don't know what it is. Well, this came to me, and it was like, how to, when I'm in a tough spot, right? When I'm stuck, what's the shortcut to not being stuck? What do I need to remember in order to get unstuck? And these 4 phrases came to mind. I'm already whole. Everything is a gift. I'm here to serve. And number 4 is, this too shall pass. And I've thought about adding others to it, and certainly have, but ultimately, every time I think about a new one, it seems to fit under one of those 4. And so I'll just spend a minute or two on each, which is, I'm already whole. We are in a constant state of amnesia around our own wholeness. We always tend to think that the answers to our problems are out there, or that something's missing and we need to get it. I mean, that's why I love the Wizard of Oz, right? It's such a great, story about this, and where the realization of the hero's journey is that you had it all along. And so can I just start there? Can we all just start there and just remind ourselves that we're already whole? Because then that causes an internal looking at how am I just a little bit divorced from my own resources. And so rather than thinking we need to add to the plate, it's more that we need to take things away so it can reveal what's already whole and what's already full, and where we already have the resources and the capacity to handle what life is throwing at us. And then the second is, everything is a gift. And when you realize how you're already whole and that you don't really need anything, right? That then all of a sudden, anything you do get, it's so obvious to see that it's a gift, even the stuff that we don't want. And it's not that I don't mean this from like a fate standpoint. I don't actually think everything's a gift. I think that the only sane way to look at it is to figure out how it's a gift. Because even when good stuff or bad stuff happens to us, like what else do we have other than to learn from it? And how do we? And that is how it creates a gift. The third one, I'm here to serve. It's like, once you realize that you're already whole and everything is a gift, well, then the only other that leads to, well, what do I do with all of it then? If I'm already whole and everything's a gift, what do I do? Oh, serve. I'm here to serve. That's what makes things meaningful, right? Is to be able to support other people and to be able to help other people. How am I serving? That's what gives meaning. That's what makes it worth going through the shitty stuff, because it feels so damn good to serve.
Right.
And whenever I'm getting too worked up or I'm too like in the dumps and I don't understand why, it's like, go help somebody. Go help somebody. And all of a sudden it changes. And then the last one, this too shall pass. It's like, no matter how good a moment is, no matter how bad a moment is, it's going to pass.
Yeah.
And it reminds us not just that the moment will pass, but that we will pass and everybody we know will die, including ourselves. And to be reminded of the impermanence of life gives it so much meaning and gives us, it's like you don't want to believe your highs too much, right? Like you don't want to believe your lows too much. And you don't, it's like a reminder that like life is just a process and like all we're experiencing is just passing through this present moment and it disappears as soon as it arrives. And it gives us a little bit of a relaxation to know that we don't have to control every last thing.
Yeah.
So those four things, I mean, there's a million things, but it's just like, I feel like when and what I like to work with people on is not just saying, hey, these are your four phrases, but like, I think we should all work on what resonates. What are some principles that really resonate with us most so that we can have a shortcut to being reminded of what's true and can help us move through life with more ease.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And even one that specifically that you said that stuck out to me was just when you're stuck, or in sort of a rut, helping someone, and that will kind of open your eyes. And I think it's so, some people don't realize how powerful it can be to help people and how it can be, you're doing it for them and for yourself. And it can be so rewarding and really show you what's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like you've done a tremendous amount of self-work to kind of get where you are now. Obviously, we all still have work to do, but I know part of what kind of has shaped your experience or your difficulties with dyslexia and ADD. And I was, curious if you could talk about how that's shaped you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, I'm, first of all, like I don't put myself out. The only reason I'm an expert on any of this is because I struggle with all this stuff.
Right.
I like to think of it as like I grow for the growth of all. That's the only thing that makes all the shit that we go through worth anything is if we're doing it for everybody. And I see it as I'm leaving myself breadcrumbs. This is everything I say is as much an advertisement to myself about how to orient to things as it is to anybody else. But yeah, and one of the things I've struggled with is dyslexia and attention deficit disorder, right? So that has been a real challenge in my life dyslexia in particular, since I was, in second, third grade. And the way that it manifests is, I just make sense of things totally differently. And I read super slowly and I am often quite disorderly. I'm one of these people that loves order. Like there's some disorderly people who don't care about order. Like they're fine living in a mess. They're fine things being not in order and it's fine, right? Me, I'm one of these people that like really needs things in order. Like it's deeply calming to my nervous system and I'm utterly terrible at it. I'm just terrible at keeping things in order and like my physical spaces neat and clean and whatnot. And I'm a super slow reader and I am terrible with directions. I can't figure out where I'm at any time. It's crazy. I was once a delivery driver in high school before GPS. And it was terrible. I was the worst. but the reason I bring that up is to say, like, I think we're in this moment now, which I think is a good moment where there's a lot less stigma around, various challenges that people face. And it's one of these sort of invisible kinds of things. But I'm so grateful for it because, so I listen to books. I don't really read. I mean, I very rarely read. I mean, I can count on, two hands the number of books I've read in my adult life from cover to cover, like maybe 10 books in 30 years, right? Or not 20, 28 years. Um, and, and so I can read, it's just super slow. And I just go off in the distance really easily. So I listen to books. Um, and I also really thankful for dyslexia because it's partly, I think, why I'm able to make sense of things differently. I look at problems differently. And if everybody is thinking the same way, well, then you're not going to get new innovation. You're not going to get a new way to look at things. And so I just like to normalize the fact that like people can do awesome things even with I think we make excuses. Oh, I can't do that because I can't stay focused, or I can't do that because I turn my numbers around, or whatever it is. And you know it's been something I'm grateful for.
Yeah, I mean, it shows how you saw how that was a gift.
Hmm. Right, because everything's a gift,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And not to say, I also just want to say that like stuff I've been through is nothing compared to other people, and I think that I I can't speak to what like severe poverty is like and other things. And so I also want to acknowledge that like or being in a war-torn zone and dealing with seeing people shot in front of you and stuff like that. Like the kind of stuff I'm talking about is, more for people who, have lived, relatively privileged lives in various ways that still struggle in some key ways. And there are other people who really focus on people that are coming from a different perspective. And I just want to acknowledge that in some of what I talk about, because I think that I don't want to minimize like really, really hard stuff.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It's important to have that self-awareness, and um,
Yeah,
that's the world that we live in. And we grew up, I think, both of us in a privileged manner that had us avoiding a lot of those very serious issues. And that said, everybody still has the things they deal with.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So throughout your career and adult life, you've really helped a lot of people. It's been incredible to be witness to some of that for some of these years, and I'm curious if there are any stories or a story that stands out where you just really saw how your work could affect change.
Mm,
Maybe someone that came up
mm-hmm,
to you, or something that you
mm-hmm.
saw happen where you knew you had a hand in it.
My A good friend of mine had seen me lead this connection exercise, this meditation that gets people really dropped into their hearts and connected to each other, and had seen me do it at Burning Man. And he said, I want you to do it at my wedding. And so um, when him and his partner got married, um, it was a 3-day wedding, and they gathered everybody up on that first day. And I led for about an hour. I led what I would normally lead for people at Burning Man or whatever, but this was such a different crowd because it included their parents and like their normal people from all around the world, like not out there hippies or whatever, and and people of all ages too, and from different countries and everything. So you look at this group and you think, wow, this is a group of people that I bet has a lot of beliefs about who they can connect with here and how. And um, leading this was really potent. And during the sharing afterwards, hearing, people, men in their 60s stand up and say, wow, I never realized, I don't think I've ever looked into a guy's eyes like that before. Um, and I realized just how much I've missed out on because of the way I was raised to interact with men, right? Or, um, just things like that where people have like really potent experiences. But it wasn't that. I'd seen that before, what was really powerful was to watch how it shifted the relational field for the rest of the weekend. Like people just kept saying, wow, I feel so connected to everybody. Wow, it's so easy to talk to everybody. I really feel like at home here, and because there's something about leading this kind of thing that 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 really, like, we all walk into social situations with so many shitty ideas about who we can connect with and how welcome we really are, and whether we matter, and all of these things. And there's something about getting everybody on the same page with that open secret in a way that they can feel in their systems, that really transforms a space and gives people an opportunity to experience empathy and connection across lines of difference,
Yeah.
uh, all kinds of lines. And that was the moment where I was like, oh my God, yeah, this is important work. And it's also the most like all I do is I lead this thing, and like all these people have this experience, and it's like it seems like the most highest leverage thing I ever do,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And I'm sure many of those people still think about that session.
Yeah. No, I mean, I mean, I get like all these people like months later, years later. So, what was that thing that you, and so that reminds me that this work is really, really important, even though a lot of people are resistant to it because they're like, I don't want to, like, I
Right.
don't, like, there's a reason why. There's also a lot of protection in why we don't want to connect deeper with people.
Right. Right.
So,
People are sort of stuck in their bubbles and are used to
yeah.
doing things a certain way, and it's scary to think of doing things another way.
Yeah, yeah, and you have to want, you, even though it's like getting out of a comfort zone to do that work, it's also really important that people want to do it,
Yeah.
right? Like you can't, it doesn't work if you're forced.
Yeah. Well, that was a great example. And in terms of recalling experiences that were impactful, is there anything from your childhood that you recall really showing you the importance of giving back?
Well, yeah, so I was in high school. There's this, you know about Interact?
I,
It's like the Rotary Club for like people in high school. It's like
hmm,
a service organization. So I was president of the Interact chapter and started it at my high school. And early on in the beginning of that, there was a family who had an autistic child that reached out and was looking for volunteers to participate in a new form of um, therapy that involved volunteers learning this way. And they had like a two-way mirror in their basement,
wow.
where they had like people come and watch while we were playing with this kid in the room. And he was like 5 and had pretty significant autism. And we learned this whole method. And I just remember working with this kid and seeing him shift and get delighted at different ways and learning his world. Like I got to learn his world. Part of this thing we were learning was like like most things for autistic kids want to stop them from doing the stimming and things like that. And so we were taught like to go in and actually like do all their little like movements with them and like go to their world. And it was just such an interesting exploration of humanity,
Yeah.
and to watch him grow, and then also the camaraderie that would happen amongst the other volunteers. I remember that really being potent. And I wrote my, like, I think I was it my senior thing or something in college. I wrote like a really important piece in my, like, for like a senior project or something like that on this experience and being able to play a role in this kid's life. So powerful.
Yeah, it's amazing that you had that opportunity and that you really made it for yourself by starting that chapter, and um, I'm sure that it's had a long lasting impact on you.
Yeah, yeah, it really has.
So this is the part in the podcast where, if you'd like, you get to ask one question of me.
Ah, yeah. So I thought about this, and I can tell that I'm a little nervous asking about it because you and I have never talked about it. But especially given that we can edit whatever out we don't want. I figured rather than pre-asking you this, I would just do it here in a way because it make it more real. Um, and that is, you come from a very, very, very wealthy family, and I've known lots and lots of people because of the work that I've done who have come from a lot of money, and you are different than all of them. And you've built, you're such an entrepreneur, you've built all these other businesses and you've done it um, as your own person, right? And I mean, I just think it's amazing. And I'm really curious about what, how do you, what is it about, why have you decided to take that route? And what do you think makes you so different in that way than other people who were raised in families that are in that category?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the kind words. Um, I mean, I'd have to start with my parents, and my grandparents. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors and immigrants, and my dad immigrated from Israel, and they came here with nothing, and we were always reminded of that as kids, and for better or worse, and that it takes hard work to build things up, and that along the way you always have to think about others and who you're impacting, and our sort of family mantra from my dad was Tikkun Olam, repair the world, in Hebrew. And
Mm,
so in everything we do, we try to incorporate that. And um, so I think having great parents certainly helped my brother and sister and I maintain our values, um, have good ones. And, in terms of doing things on my own versus like leaning into the family business, um, I just have always kind of been that a little bit rebellious, a little bit of free spirit. And, I always have honestly, struggled with being the owner's kid at businesses and things like that. And I wanted to prove to myself, to my family, to my peers that I can stand on my own, and that, what my family is, the incredible things they've done for me are tools in my toolbox that I can use to make positive impact. And um, it's just things that I hope to impart on my son right now, and maybe other kids eventually.
mhm.
And um, just the world is all about people, and I just try to take that into account in everything that I do.
Mm, that's awesome. That's really um, that's really admirable. And uh, yeah, I would think that there's a lot of opportunity to also um, help other people who are kind of maybe in your similar boat, um, be able to make that transition. That's always curious about how that, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up like other people who have maybe grown up in a similar category. I mean, I think for us, my parents never really gave us the keys, if you will. They were
Mm,
always very much aware of what was going on in our lives, what we were getting, what we weren't getting. We, of course, were spoiled. It's hard to not be, but especially you have
sure.
great parents that want to take care of you, but they always taught us mindfulness and to be self-aware, and to keep other people's situations in mind. And I think that there's
Hmm.
some people in that category haven't grown up with self-awareness, and sometimes they eventually find it, sometimes they don't. And like you're saying, there's ways to,
Right.
to kind of teach that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, like there's some way that you really are a product of your environment in the sense that your parents created the kind of environment where you could become who you are now. Whereas a lot of really wealthy um, families don't offer that kind of structure or that kind of environment, because the natural thing would be to just really indulge into the whole thing, and then you wind up with yeah. I'm watching. I'm thinking of it a lot right now because I'm watching
Yeah.
Succession. Have you seen?
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's
um,
some ridiculous people there, and I think part of, you're mentioning indulgence. My dad was not the indulgent type. He got what he needed and, tried to make himself comfortable, but he was not one for opulence, was not one for a spotlight. And so humility has always been really important to me, and doing justice to all of the effort that he and my mom and my grandparents put in to get me this opportunity that I have in life now.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So glad.
Well, I appreciate the question. And, sort of the big one that I like to mostly wrap up with is, if you could snap your fingers and fix one thing about the world, what would it be, and how do you think that change would reverberate?
Yeah. So what I would, I think that we are struggling right now in our culture. Well, we always have, but I think it's particularly highlighted right now in not being able to see our not being able to see our blind spots. Like people are so it's so easy for us to become that which we hate. Um, and I guess if I could change one thing, it would be for people to realize that um, when we get too focused on what other people are doing wrong and too focused on like judging others, we wind up not seeing the ways in which we are becoming that which we're judging. And I see this over and over and over again, particularly in the political realm, as things become much more polarized, but we also see it interpersonally. There's the thing about the speck in someone else's eye, but you can't see the log in your own, right? And uh, I wish that we could all be able to more easily see that it's turtles all the way down, right? That like we can't um, like the process of introspection and looking for our blind spots is never over. The ego is really good at finding a way to capture things, right? And we have us versus them ideologies. We have um, like we're vengeful, right? Human beings, we've got a lot of vengeance in us and everything. And I think if more people were able to sense, to be able to really know that that exists in them, they wouldn't be so quick. They would be able to see their scapegoating, and to be able to, um, you know, also look within at the same time as you're judging, right? To be able to look within and see the ways in which you're externalizing or projecting something outward into the world. And I think this is like the heart of most of the political stuff that we've got going on right now in the political divides, is that people are clinging so hard to their righteousness, that they're violating the very basics of their own beliefs in their effort to rout out other people that disagree with them.
Yeah.
And it's horrifying, and it's the heart of all of the worst atrocities that have ever happened in this world.
Yeah.
Start there. It's when we stop seeing that we're all the same.
Yeah, it goes back to that soul to soul.
Yeah. Like that too, right? Like it's like everything that is possible to feel, every impulse that this is why shadow work is so important, right? We've got to be able to look at our own shadows, or else they will come out of nowhere and eat us alive, and I see this in so many of the debates that are happening right now, when people start feeling like joyful when somebody dies or something. It's just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, and it's not like, I'm not like mad in the sense of like, how dare you, that means you're awful.
Right.
No, I say it as like, yeah, that's part of it. But if you can't see what's problematic about that,
Yeah,
then we gotta, you know what I mean? Like
I
that's
do.
like a shadow. We want to be looking at that, right? So anyway,
Hey, yeah, it's
um,
just, looking at things from a different perspective, trying to get rid of so much of the hatred that doesn't need to be out there.
hmm absolutely,
So,
absolutely. And I'm saying that to myself too.
yeah,
I get mad at those people. We need to, we need to get rid of, everybody who can't love everybody, right? It's like, oh well, you know, and with no irony whatsoever until I realize the irony,
right,
right? And that's my last thing, which I would say is that I would really like people to learn the value of, like, to really get the deep philosophical and therapeutic value of humor,
right,
right? Like humor is part of this, right? Like we're funny. I mean, humans are a trip.
absolutely. Um, well, I think that's a great message to cap this off with. But for those listening, how can they support you and your impact?
Oh, keep looking at your blind spots, and keep enjoying life. Get some juicy habits. That would be helpful. But yeah, no, I mean, I think if I have some room in my practice right now. So always, looking to work with people who are looking to experience more joy and more connection and vitality in their lives, particularly people who are in big life transitions. And then also, if you are bringing a group together for any reason that you think it would be valuable for that group to feel more connected for whatever it is you're about to do, I'd love to come and lead some things that can really wake up the emotional field. So whether that's a wedding, a funeral, a reunion, a corporate retreat, you name it. And then lastly, if you're in the cannabis or the psychedelic industries and you think it would be valuable to unplug and relax and really drift into a different way of being for a couple days with other people that work in your field, um, highly recommend considering coming to the Reflections Retreat, August 11th through 14th.
Great. Well, I will be sure to include all that information in the show notes as well, and can get any relevant links, etc. And really, really appreciate you taking the time to join me today. And it's always great talking, and I'm excited to get this out there and to share these awesome messages that you've given us during this talk. And I always look forward to our future conversations.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you're doing this. This is so awesome. You're just like you're such a prolific entrepreneur. Like, I don't know where you get the time to also do this. But I'm so glad that you're doing it. It's such a reflection of your big heart.
I really appreciate it. And, it's one of those things I've made time for because I enjoy it and believe in it. So hopefully I can continue to do that in other areas as well.
Right on. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of People Are the Answer. To find out more, go to peoplearetheanswer.com.